Welcome to our last week together. This week we will be discussing chapters 11, 12, and 14. The first chapter we're going to discuss is the students who are deaf and or hard of hearing. Here's a video to help get us started. So in the beginning of the Flintstone video, you had a chance to see what it looked like when
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Aha! You're on my apartment building on Granite Avenue. You owe me $300. Get it up?
Fred, take it easy. It's only a game.
Wilma, I'm just like them big tycoons. I play to win. Now, Barney, pay up or get out of the game.
So once again, now we're at moderate.
I don't have any more money either. You got it all.
You can hear them talking, but you don't know what they're saying. And then at severe, it's to the point where it truly is just muffled. So the Flintstones video just gives you a very quick snapshot of what it's like for someone who has those different type of hearing losses. So then if you have a student or you have a family member or someone that you work really closely with who is experiencing different types of hearing loss, it's going to be important that you take these different types of approaches into consideration when it comes to communicating with the child. Here's a video that goes over the different types of communication approaches that are used in schools. So as we watch and we read what is being transcribed based on these students' ASL, you're noticing that they have different preferences. And based on their preferences, that's how they have chosen to communicate. And so it's going to be important that the school, the teacher, is not only familiar with it, but knows how to possibly communicate back with the child. So now they're sharing what has been done and what some of their favorite teachers have done for them. He's using fingerspell. So now they're on to teaching tips. And these suggestions are things that any teacher should use. They don't have to be the teacher of someone who is deaf and or hard of hearing. Yeah, and that makes sense. You know, you would want a teacher who is fluent. So now we're going to share some of the hardest parts of being in the school environment. Right? Who doesn't have their share of drama in middle school? Which is exactly what it is. But mediation is necessary at times because nowadays bullying is a huge problem in our school system. So what are your thoughts? Let's pause for a second and discuss this further. Now that we've had a chance to discuss the video as well as in the different types of communication approaches that we have either have experience with or have seen or not at all, this concludes this chapter about deafness and hard of hearing. Chapter 12 is all about children with vision impairments. Let's check out this video that's going to talk about the different ways great teachers can support individuals with vision impairments.
What makes a great teacher of the visually impaired?
Someone who's passionate,
self-motivated, dedicated, really love a challenge.
A student reading Braille looks up and laughs. J.J. Isaacson, teacher of the visually impaired.
And it's like working a problem all the time with every kid. And so you're not bored. You're certainly not bored.
Tracy Spahn, orientation and mobility specialist.
the best part about my job is that I get to encourage the parents, support them, connect with them, let them know that, hey, everything is going to be okay.
A group of teachers and staff confer around a table. Corey Grandstaff, teacher of the visually impaired.
We're always collaborating on what strategies work best for a student.
Jill Peterson, teacher of the visually impaired.
Positively impact my students by teaching them how to ask for help as well as decline help.
Carrie Tanner, teacher of the visually impaired.
One of the things I think about a lot is that I can change perceptions about blindness, not only the students' own perceptions, but their teachers and the public's.
JJ is in her math class teaching geometry to students using Braille, manipulatives, and instruction.
I tell people, they're like, how do you teach geometry? And I just say, I talk a lot.
So imagine it, you know what it kind of looks like to me is like a ramp. Have you ever gone up a ramp, like a wheelchair ramp? Slope, it's got that long slope to it. That would be from vertex C to vertex A.
A car drives along a gorge with a cliff face on one side and tall pines on the other.
It's gorgeous. There's mountains and rivers and lakes.
The state of Washington is a great place to work and play. A woman is fly fishing in the warm glow of a late afternoon.
I want to pause right here because I want to bring up the fact that everyone is pretty much familiar with closed captioning. You know, an individual has a hearing impairment, you turn on closed captioning, they can hear what's going on. When it comes to those with vision impairments, it's important to not only have the closed captioning available so the screen reader can read it for them, but it's also important for there to be audio descriptions. So pay attention to some of the audio descriptions that are being given. Just now they said there's a lady fly fishing in a lake, because this is something that as a if you were deaf, then if you did not have a vision impairment, you would be able to see what the lady's doing, what she's wearing, you know, give some descriptors. So when you have someone who is visually impaired in your classroom, it's important for you to give audio descriptions. Woman enters room, you know, boy sits in front of class, you know, lady is fly fishing. So because you have to give them the audio, you have to give them the description of what is being seen. So as the teacher just shared, she does a lot of talking. Yes, you have to talk through every aspect of your lesson plan.
A couple holding a baby walk along the beach. A field of grain sways in the wind. A girl walks along a riverbed in the forest. Teacher of the visually impaired, Carrie Tanner, arrives at one of the several schools she works at during the week.
And I get to provide consult to their teachers in their classrooms, so I get to see all of these different classrooms, all of these different types of kids.
Second grader Angel reads Braille as Carrie helps her over the difficult numbers.
It's pretty cool, and I think it also helps make me a better teacher, just to see so many different teachers.
I want my students to go and go places. You know what I mean? One day I hope that my students are lawyers and doctors and professionals.
You'll never have a better job.
It's a powerful reason to wake up in the morning.
You will never meet better students.
Join us.
To find out more about training.
So the video obviously focuses on opportunities in Washington State. However, they are still strategies and techniques that everyone who works with students with vision impairments can take into consideration. I felt like it was really important for me to share why they were sharing the narrator was sharing the extra information about what was going on in the video, because it's something that those of us who have vision take for granted, because we can just look. If there's just music playing, it's like, oh, okay, well, let me see what's going on screen. When I see a lady getting out of a car and she's walking into the building, yeah, we're using our vision. It's something that is not really on our radar because we all have our vision. But for those who do not have vision, imagine sitting through that video, there would have been times where you'd have just been sitting there hearing music playing. And it's like, well, everybody else is taking in the fact that the lady is fly fishing or walking through a stream or hiking or this and the other. but here I am without my vision not being able to do so. Vision impairments can also include poor visual acuity. This first picture here looks like it might be in a big city, maybe New York, possibly Times Square, based on kind of how those lights are falling and that building smack dab in the middle. But you can kind of think of it as you have this fuzziness that comes in, and this is beyond astigmatism, which is something that I have and I know other people have, and that's where you have a hard time kind of smoothing out things. It takes a little bit for things to come into complete focus. They may be a little fuzzy, but with poor visual acuity, this is what it looks like all the time, and it can be enhanced, which is something that a person would not want in the nighttime because of all the lights and the moving and everything else. If you have a limited field of vision, it is, as I have said in the last couple of weeks, self-explanatory. Then you or the student has a limited field of vision. In this particular case, this person can only see, which looks like pretty much 20/20, but everything else in their periphery is blocked out. It could be a number of reasons why, but it's basically what it is. So they may have to move their head in order to get a full range of everything that is within their field of vision. When you think of periphery vision, a lot of times people will think they're left and they're right, but it does include what's above and below you. And as you're sitting here at your desk now, or maybe in your car, or you're just looking at the screen, think about everything that you can see in your periphery, regardless if it is in focus or not. Even sitting here at my desk right now, I can see the window to my right. There's the door to the room on my left. Above me is a ceiling fan that's going, and below me is like my foot stand that I use for balancing when I'm doing the standing desk thing. So you think about that and then take that away. So then now this is how that person is viewing the world through this limited field of vision. There's different levels of it. You could have total blindness, once again, self-explanatory, but it also means they don't get any type of light detection. And so in this case, these individuals may learn best through touch and or listening. And I say may because there could be some that have adopted another way of learning and it works for them. And if it works for them, then you usually go with it. Incorporate it into their IEP, make sure they have the documentation to support it so you're not doing more harm than good. And then you just, figure out resources and accommodations accordingly. Sometimes students have functional blindness. Again, self-explanatory. The functional piece is now allowing them to have that vision so that they can take care of their basic functions. Toileting needs, bathing, eating, cleaning up after themselves, things of this nature. It's suggested that they also learn best by touch and listening, but they may have some useful sight, and that useful sight is the functioning piece. So, that sight that they use for their basic functions, which I've already stated. Then there's those with low vision. Once again, self-explanatory. This is considered a severe visual impairment, but they can use the remaining vision for learning. It all just depends. Sometimes we have students with low vision who can't handle a lot of light. So the lights in the classroom need to be either dimmed or turned off. Or if it's a case where light can't be controlled so much, like if they're viewing a video or something, they may put on special glasses to help filter out some of that light. And then blindness in one eye is basically blindness in one eye. And then sometimes these people may have difficulty with depth perception because you need both eyes to be able to determine that. So there may be additional things put in place. And as it says here, additional accommodations. They may have a walking stick so that they can be able to navigate stairs and slopes better. All based on documentation, all based on the resources. And then from there, the documentation helps with gathering the resources that the child will need in the classroom. So when it comes to talking about visual impairments, you may hear a variety of terms that I've already stated. Educational terms could be low vision or functional blindness. But then when it comes to reading, it all depends on, this is where the accommodations and modifications come into place. If it's blindness in one eye, depending on the child's needs, they may be able to handle standard printing. They may want it put up on a screen so that they can zoom in and zoom out, or have their screen reader read it for them. And these are different types of assistive technology pieces. For those with low vision, they may benefit from large print, and that might be enough to be able to accommodate them just fine. Legal blindness, once again, you're going off of what is best for the student. So large print and or Braille. Braille has to be taught, whereas in large print, obviously we just make things bigger. And even sometimes putting things on a different colored background, which is a strategy that I've used in the past. So instead of it having on that standard bright white, having it on yellow or that baby blue. There's certain colors when you go into school supply stores or office supply stores, different colors. Once again, printed out, it may help with lessening the impact of how their vision impairment is impacting them. I have had students in the classroom as well as in a university level who have been able to target and alleviate some of their symptoms that come with low vision. In their cases, they would develop really bad headaches. So having just that on a different background, or having it in the Kindle where they can control the brightness of the screen, helps prevent them from having a headache. Now, these are strategies that are, like I've said before, are based on the particular student. So it isn't something that, it's something to consider, but it isn't something that you can necessarily say like, oh yeah, well I can just have this, presented on a screen and then it'll be fine. You have to take into consideration what the student's documentation says and what the student is comfortable with. Similar to in the last chapter where we watched the video about the students using ASL, there are preferences there. And so as the teacher, the child care provider, the parent, family member, it's important to take what works for them into consideration. And then the people who are totally blind, they may rely on Braille, or they may have audiobooks, which isn't listed here, but is definitely a viable option. Now, when it comes to traveling independently and being oriented in their space and mobility, there's different ways individuals with vision impairments can do this. They may use a human guide, and then sometimes, depending on the school, in the K through 12 environment, sometimes parents will hire someone to be their child's human guide, and then they're led around by this person. And in other cases, they may use their cane. And so, you may have seen people, by now I'm assuming everyone has seen someone use a cane before. And that's one of the reasons why, it is one of the reasons why when you get to certain curbs, you will see like markers. They call them those truncated domes. They can be a variety of colors, but I kind of feel like the standard color is that yellow, is like a caution yellow. And so if a person has a cane, or if they're in a wheelchair or a walker, as they are progressing down the sidewalk, when they get to that part of the sidewalk, there's usually a slope, there's usually grooves in the cement, and then there's a truncated dome mat that will let them know, okay, I need to stop. There is, I'm entering an intersection. There's usually, my brain, like those traffic controller buttons. I love how my brain just goes blank sometimes. But if you want to cross the street, you go up and you push the button, and they'll have the audio saying, please wait, especially at the airport, please wait. And so that lets those people with vision impairments know that, okay, yes, please wait. So they've gotten the notification from the truncated domes. Someone has pushed the button, or they've pushed the button, and it's saying, please wait. And then it'll tell you when to go. And then it's got the beeping sound, so you'll know how much longer you have to safely cross the street, and things of that nature. So there are things in place to help individuals with vision impairments move around independently, kind of gather their orientation within the environment, and they too, we as a society provide the accessible walkways, and then they're able to mobilize themselves depending on whatever tool they're using to get around. There's also the dog. You may see people with the vest on their dog that says CNI dog, and that's there for awareness, to let other people in the community and that they're around know that their dog is a service dog. It is here to basically be their eyes and keep them out of danger as much as possible. And then you have the electronic travel aids. These are things that are available in certain areas. And I know in Silicon Valley, they have a lot of these little different things set up, or at least they did, set up to where it's basically an app, and it tells you how many paces you are away from the bathroom. If you're trying to get back to where you parked your car, it can pinpoint where you are, where your car was left, and someone is saying, well, if they're blind, why would they need a car? Yeah, but at the same time, if they come on a van and there's like, oh, okay, by this time I got to be back to get on the van, the electronic travel guide can tell them, depending on how it's set up, how many paces and then turn left, then how many more paces to turn right, and then you're gonna, so they have different kind of like little hotspots set up. So no matter where they are, they have a way of knowing where they are and where they need to be. Let's watch a little video about what it's like to travel independently as a person who is visually impaired.
There's only one place like it in Orange County. Reporter Vanessa Pang visits a school for the visually impaired and shows us how it's making a difference in the lives of its students.
This is 4-year-old Nora Flynn. Even though she's visually impaired, she's learning the same things a sighted child would at the Blind Children's Learning Center in Santa Ana.
What letter did we do today?
M.
M. Can you think of a word that starts with M?
Mommy.
Mommy.
Jenny Sharp is Nora's teacher. She says kids at the center get the same curriculum offered at any preschool with some adjustments for the visually impaired.
When we did letter M today, we taught it in print. We also taught it in Braille for our students. We also try to make all of our activities tactile.
Are you all done? Did you make your math, Nora?
Yeah. During the day, the kids follow the object communication system. Each child has an object that represents them and their cubby section, which has items like this paintbrush for art time, because they recognize activities by touch, not by sight.
Our goal for our children is independence. Give them the skills that they need and the knowledge to be independent in just about every aspect of their life.
If you're happy and you know it, then your face will surely show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Sighted kids attend the school too, like Nora's brother AJ. Their mom Heather says he learns social skills he may not have at another school.
He's learned to be very careful around the other kids, and he's learned to help his friends because he knows they need help, which I think is a very important thing for all kids to learn.
She says the Learning Center is a critical part of Nora's development.
Our lives would be completely different without this place. There is nowhere else in Southern California that has preschool services for blind children. She does all the things normal kids do, but I know that she wouldn't have done that without this place.
If you would like to help or learn more about the Blind Children's Learning Center, go to www.blindkids.org. This is Vanessa Pang reporting.
And this concludes Chapter 12, Vision Impairments. Last but not least, we have Chapter 14, which focuses on children who are gifted and talented. And here in Southern California, we refer to these students as being in the GATE program, the Gifted and Talented Education program. So are giftedness and talent and being talented the same? So they're not the same. A lot of times people will think that if a child is gifted, that means they're talented. If they're talented, that means they're gifted. But in reality, they are different. To be gifted means to have an exceptional intelligence or academic ability. A lot of times it's, they will tie that into the score on an IQ test, or if they have done something that is really shown that, wow, they're really, getting this information and not only like being able to memorize it, but they're able to apply it and keep going with it at a faster rate than someone at their level. When it comes to being talented, students in the past, and I agree with them, have always said that's more when you think about people who are exceptional at different types of art. And that could be music or actual art, like performance art or visual arts, athletic abilities. You could say, okay, this person is talented. He, yes, has worked at it, or she has worked at it to become this pro athlete or this star athlete. And it's like, yeah, but she's also naturally talented. And so he or she built on that to become whoever they are within the sports or entertainment world. So they are separate. When it comes to giftedness, that's more so in what you're going to see in the K through 12 environment. They're going to be in a different classroom. They may call it the gifted program or the GATE program. And there they are working on and enhancing all the things that go into their learning. And then when you have those talented individuals in the K through 12 environment, you don't necessarily see the star athlete sitting in the gifted class. Not to say those who are athletic or are athletes cannot be a part of the GATE program, because I got to throw that out there because someone will hear it and be like, well, here's the exception. There's always an exception. But what I say that to mean, basically, you can be talented and not in the gifted program. And you can be gifted and not have any necessarily talents that make you above, make you perform above like the general population. Giftedness specifies areas of it, and it allows for the gifted traits and the gifted behaviors to have a place to go. So when it comes to the education system, it tends to bounce and focus on the information. Here we go. Howard Gardner's concept of multiple intelligences. And so now we're looking at different things. Is it linguistic? That's the way they speak and communicate. Are they gifted in the area of logical and mathematical skills? Is it musical? Is it spatial? You know, these are different areas. And so when they take the IQ test and they take other forms of assessment to determine whether or not the child meets the requirements to be in the GATE program, they're looking at where they fall on the IQ test in these areas and then making a decision, yay or nay. You know, yes, the child will be a part of the GATE program, or he or she will not. Students of color and those with disabilities have been historically underrepresented in these types of programs. I believe it was either the first class, no, I'm sorry, it was the second class. I talked about different legal cases that impacted special education. This would be where the Larry P. Riles and the Larry P. Riles case will come back up again because of the way that court case fell out, where individuals who are Black cannot receive, cannot be tested by the school system as far as for IQ is concerned. And then, as I shared, if a parent wants their child to be tested and given an opportunity to be a part of it, then he or she or they, depending on how you want to look at it, will present those scores, but they have to go out and do that on their own. When it comes to placement options for these students, there's a general education classroom, and so in that case, they don't necessarily get special attention, but they may be clustered or grouped with other gifted students. So they may be given different things, different activities that give them an opportunity to think about the concepts and skills on a higher order level of thinking. And then sometimes they may be in the general education classroom with the resource room. And so in those cases, you can think of it as pull out. And so it's like, okay, they may be in, you know, the general education classroom for science, health. I'm gonna take science off the table, maybe for history and health, PE. But then when it comes to those core academic courses, they may go to a different room and take those gifted courses there with other children who are gifted. Sometimes they have self-contained classrooms where they spend the whole day. So they're on a general education campus, but instead of doing pull-out and spending part of their day in a general education classroom, they may report to their classroom, and that's where they spend the entire day. Very similar to the resource room for special education, and gifted and talented does fall up under the umbrella of gifted of special education, but instead of them reporting to the room where it's mild moderate students or mild severe students or medically fragile, they're reporting to the gifted and talented resource room. And there are special schools that are available. Magnet schools. I went to a magnet school in New Orleans, not so much because I was gifted and talented, but because the school systems in Louisiana are different. And having been an Army brat and lived all over, we're exposed to different levels of education, and where we were coming from moved at a faster rate than they did in Louisiana. And so one way my parents were, they felt more comfortable making sure I was still on target as far as in getting the education that they felt I deserved, was having me take a test and place into a magnet school. And another phrase that you may hear instead of magnet is college preparatory schools. And so these schools, especially where I grew up, they feed into the private universities in Louisiana, and they feed into other private universities throughout America. And so you kind of start to get tracked and linked up with different resources that ensure that you will not only be prepared to enter college, but do well at least your first year. Sometimes there are state-sponsored residential schools, and then there's visual and performing arts academies. There's one here in San Diego that I've heard. We used to have neighbors whose children went there, and it's all about the performing arts. In New Orleans, it's called NOCA. It's like New Orleans Creative something arts. But then it gives them, these children who are very talented in the visual and performing arts, it gives them a space to work on their portfolio and to work on their skill, in addition to, earning their high school education. And this concludes Chapter 14, the GATE program.